Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our press conference that we hold each Wednesday morning after a Tuesday council meeting. We had several interesting issues that we dealt with last night that we'll go back over today and see if anybody has any questions about them. But first of all, I want to mention an upcoming event on Friday, March the 3rd, and Saturday, March the 4th. If you haven't heard, it's the inaugural Henry Armstrong Boxing Classic. And it's being put on by Sand Promotions with support from the Columbus Lounge Convention and Visitors Bureau and the Henry Armstrong Foundation, which is located in Los Angeles. Henry Armstrong, as most of you know, is a very famous boxer who was born here in Columbus and had a very successful boxing career. Many argue that he is, if not the best, was one of the best professional boxers. Many boxers that came after him talked about his form and how they mimicked his form and his attitude in the ring. Columbus, recently we named a street in his honor, and we've had, there's a committee, the Henry Armstrong Committee, that has worked for many years to try to bring recognition to Mr. Armstrong, and we hope to continue that process. This event will be the inaugural event, as I mentioned, on Friday the 3rd and 4th. I encourage people to purchase tickets and support this event. We're hoping that this one will be an example of other events that we can have in the future to honor Mr. Armstrong. There's also a movement to raise money to build a statue for Mr. Armstrong that is tentatively thought to maybe be housed near the Tennessee Williams Visitor Center, where there's also currently a Tennessee Williams statue that will be placed there in the not too distant future. So this is a way that we can recognize the heroes that were born in Columbus and then went on to do great things. Mr. Armstrong is not only known for his boxing success, but also his success afterwards when he became an ordained minister and spent his life trying to help those who are in need, the homeless, the young people, trying to help people give them an arm up to have a successful life. And so we're very proud of all of his accomplishments, and those will be recognized and talked about during Friday, March the 3rd and the 4th. His grandson, who runs the foundation in LA, and his wife will also be here for the event. So I encourage people to take note of that. Last night, one of the things that we were happy to do, the council and I had a citizens input about tianeptine, which is also known as Zaza and other names, and we had this, that was our second public hearing, giving those who were in favor of us banning the substance in the city a chance to either talk for it or against it. The first meeting we had was in Thursday of last week. The council did vote unanimously last night to create an emergency ordinance about the use, purchase, and possession of tianeptine. That will go in effect immediately. We did discuss last night that we would have our police department going around to the different stores who currently sell this drug to make them aware that the city has passed this immediately. And then also one of our concerns is those who are addicted to this substance. It's not a drug, it's a substance of some sort. It's a natural herb. They refer to it as a supplement. But it can have a devastating effect on people's lives, and we know that once people are not able to get this substance anymore, that they will be facing some terrible withdrawals. So we're going to do everything we can as a city to make people aware of this and how to get help. We will be in conversations with doctors and the hospital here to make sure that there's anything that we can do to make sure that those who are suffering from this substance can get all the help that they need. Ms. Morrison is here this morning. She tragically lost her son to this substance recently and has been a very forceful advocate for not only getting the city but also the county to outlaw this substance and encouraging the state of Mississippi to outlaw the substance, just as I believe it's 5 other states nearby, or is it that many? And so she just wanted to thank the council this morning. If you could come up, Ms. Morrison, we appreciate your bravery and your dedication to this, and thank you for being here again this morning.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to tell you how grateful I am and how thankful I am that our city stepped up and banned this dangerous drug. The unanimous vote last night was, I don't know, for some reason it was unexpected, but it really meant a lot. It shows the unity and that you realize the dangerousness. To the city council, to the mayor, to you, Jeff Turnage, our city attorney, I was going to say lawyer, just the help that you've done and the research that you've done and the time that you've put into it, it meant a lot. But I also want to say thank you to the other people who spoke, particularly to the young lady who was struggling with addiction, who had the addiction to it. It took a lot of courage for her to do that, and I just know it's going to help other people, and I'm so grateful for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And I echo what Ms. Morrison said about the others who spoke last night, especially the young lady who had suffered from an addiction from this and in other areas. It is very difficult for people to stand up and do that type of thing in any kind of situation, but for something like this, it's even harder, so we really want to thank everybody for that. Also on good news last night, the council voted unanimously to accept the recommendation from the Planning Commission to rename a portion of 21st Avenue and the 2400 block for former Councilman Fred Stewart, a much-deserved honor that Ms. Pat Douglas and others have been working on for quite some time. And we all hear about the good works of Mr. Stewart, not only as a council member, but throughout his life. He was a shining example of a gentleman and someone who worked hard for the benefit of all the citizens of Columbus, so that is a much-deserved honor that we're pleased to announce today. Also, happy to note that the council did approve the drainage improvements for 15th Street North. That is a street that we've talked about quite frequently in recent months. It's one of the ones that really suffers regularly from flooding. As I pointed out from citizens that I've spoken to over there before, one particular citizen has lived in that area for 50 years and has known nothing but the serious flooding that occurs on that street. So we look to be having some relief to that project in the very near future. On other matters that we discussed last night, one obviously that brought a lot of attention was the release of our 2020 audit that we've been waiting for quite some time. The council did not vote to approve it last night, but to table it until they had more time to review it. It was over 100 pages, which is a lot for an audit like that. The council, we will either have a special meeting to accept it in the near future, or we'll do it at the next council meeting, depending on how much time they need to review it. One of the things that we discussed last night, which I'm very much in favor for, is creating an audit committee that could be made up of some of the council members and citizens, professionals in the community, probably with CPA backgrounds and accounting, business backgrounds, to work with the city as we move forward in correcting all the issues that we need to in our accounting area. This has been something that I have talked about since I've been in office. As top priority is to correct the issues that we have faced over time for several administrations in the accounting area. This is not a way of trying to do a political slam on somebody else that was formerly in office at all. It never has been that. My call for a forensic audit not long after I took office was because of issues like that were pointed out last night. When you have mistakes going on in an area of the city, I'm a firm believer in that you do everything that you can to correct them. There is a disagreement over whether a forensic audit is necessary. I still stand by my original comments on that. But we are working very hard to make sure that we're completing the necessary steps to make sure that the kinds of things that were noted in our audit last night will not occur again. I've said this to people many times, dealing with the finances of a municipality can be a challenge at best, and something that the mayor and council should always take as a top priority. These are not our funds. These are the funds of the citizens of Columbus, and there's nothing more important than us being the best stewards possible of these funds, and I'm committed to doing that as we move forward. Are there any particular questions from anybody about the audit for me or for Jim?
One of the things that came up last night apparently as a finding was the oversight of the FEMA programs. Can you expand on that a little bit about whose responsibility was that exactly, and when did the city become aware that there were issues?
Well, the FEMA project was something that, we've known, the council took a vote, when was it, last year, not to proceed to go forward with FEMA reimbursement for the things that happened at Sim Scott. And so we were not surprised by those findings. What we are going to do is, in the future, make sure that anytime the city is doing any kind of work like that, as far as federal grants and stuff, is that we have everybody that is supposed to be involved in that process to make sure it moves as smoothly as possible to do that. And those will be things that we will talk about later after the council accepts the audit, and then we'll go into more details about the suggestions that we have moving forward.
But to piggyback off of that question for some specifics, Ms. Holly mentioned that there were invoices created that were under the $50,000 mark to avoid the bidding process. Who's creating those invoices and who's minding the store?
Again, I want to wait to delve into that more once that the council, it is public record, but before we make any statements of definity on that, I want to make sure that the council has accepted it. But we will answer those questions.
Okay. And as you mentioned, the audit is public record. We're in the process of requesting that.
Yes, I have a copy here that y'all are welcome to copy and take today.
Okay. Can you sum up, though, in lieu of us having it yet, just what the city's response is? I know that the city issued a written response in that report, and that was one of the things that Wanda did not read out. So can you sum up what the city's written response is?
Yes, I can. But Jim, would you like to come up and address that too? What I will say is that what one of the reasons that this audit is as bad, or if not worse, by some people's assessment as the 2019, when we had a embezzlement, was because the policies that the city put in place to make sure that those types of things didn't happen again were not carried out. I think for that, you would have to look back prior to my administration, to the CFO and the COO at the time, to look to see why those things weren't carried out, but they were not. Those are the things that this administration is going to make sure are carried forward going forward. And so I think that would be a good time for Jim to assess that.
So first of all, let me say that there are 11 findings in the internal control weakness findings in this report. 6 of them are material weaknesses. Material weaknesses are weaknesses in the internal control system that are very likely to cause the financial statements to be misstated. Okay, that's the highest or worst level of internal control weakness. And then there are 5 significant deficiencies, which are a notch down. They're still important, but less likely to cause a significant failure in the financial statements. And then let me say, for these 11 findings, I've been through this report, 100-page report. I do not disagree with any of them. So there's nothing that we're contentious about in this. I will tell you that the 6 material weaknesses, the first one is on bank reconciliations. Excuse me. They weren't being prepared correctly. In some cases, it appears to me that the person that was doing those at that time was not capable to do them correctly. And so they took shortcuts. You know, I don't like to use the word plug, but that's what we use in the audit industry is, you know, if you need to balance something and you can't figure out how to make it balance, you come up with a number that balances it. And that appears to be what was happening in 2020. Control over bank transfers. That was actually that's the second one. That was actually a control that was put in after the defalcation. And then the personnel who were supposed to be, you know, doing the bank transfers between bank accounts and then getting them approved, weren't getting them approved properly. And the municipal court collections, that continues to be a challenge. We had a system for court collections, fines, and we installed a separate system. So we have 2 systems over there. One of them reconciles on a daily basis. One of them is supposed to reconcile on a daily basis, but has some issues because it deals with credit card discounts and credit card fees and stuff. And but we'll be fixing that very shortly, and probably end up with one system that addresses all of it. The next issue is accounts payable accruals. You know, the city does not close the books on a hard close on a monthly basis. We don't create financial statements on a monthly basis. We give the city council and the mayor a report of where we're at, but at year end, we need to do a hard close, and we need to make sure that the business in 2020 is in the books of 2020. So what the CFO at that time failed to do was to properly accrue payments that happened in 2021 but were related to 2020 business. They should have been accrued and should have been in the 2020 expenses, and they weren't. Control over federal grants, and that's primarily because, you know, the city, because of FEMA and because of ARPA and the CARES funds, there's a $750,000 federal threshold. If the city receives more than $750,000, the auditors have to do what's called a single audit, and they look at the controls over all of the federal programs. Quite frankly, our federal programs weren't even organized so that we knew any detail on any particular one, so issues with FEMA at that time. But I will tell you that the whole organization, the whole applying for grants, administering grants, and closing grants out is a weakness the city has to address. And then the final one was budget compliance. The state of Mississippi is very clear that when you set a budget, this is what you can spend. You either stay at that or below it. You can't spend more than your revenue. Or if you do a budget amendment, so for example, if you have a year where your revenue was much higher than you expected, so you're allowed to spend more money, but you have to go back and do a budget amendment and correct it so that everybody understands that, and in 2020, they overspent the budget by about $3 million from the general fund. The significant deficiencies, control over capital assets. We need a fixed asset ledger system here. We don't have it. We have addressed a fixed asset inventory. We have tagged our fixed assets. We need to create the appropriate accounting ledgers so that we're doing the depreciation correctly on a timely basis, and that we know when we sell an asset, we take it off the books, and when we buy an asset, we make sure it goes on the books. And it's not much more complicated than that, but the city has not complied with that. That's a multiple year finding, which we will get right. It's not that hard. Landfill receivable controls, that's another area where we've had weaknesses. You know, the landfill people come in, they either pay cash or they have charge accounts for contractors, making sure that the people are paying, that we have a receivable system set up so that we know how old the bills are, and making sure that all of the cash, because we issue tickets when they go through the gate, that there's a reconciliation between who uses the landfill and who's paying for it, and making sure that there's no pass-throughs.
Well, can I stop you there? Because
Sure.
I want to ask about those specific things. I know 3-4 years maybe, those things have been mentioned. You said today and you said last night, you indicated that those things, we're talking about the fixed assets and the landfill, that those things still aren't corrected even now. What are the obstacles for correcting those things that you're dealing with, and how are you dealing with them?
I think the primary one is that we need to make sure that the systems we put in fit with our accounting system, which is Smart Fusion. Okay, Smart Fusion, when it was implemented here a few years ago, they didn't incorporate the fixed asset module, so that needs to be brought up to date, and then we need to bring all of those the fixed asset inventory in and put it in. That's labor intensive, but there's no excuse.
What's the timeline?
All of this will be corrected. Well, I say all of it. All of it will be corrected within the. I'm going to say the next 6 months. Some of it is labor intensive, so it's going to take a little more time. You know, setting up a whole accounts receivable system is something that the system, we don't even have the module for Smart Fusion, our accounting system, to have an accounts receivable system. So we have to make that purchase and get it up to date, and populate it, and then have set up processes and procedures to put it in place. Some of that. We want to make sure that when we do it correctly. I don't really have any evidence that there's any issue with landfill receivables or receipts being properly handled, but you don't know what you don't know. So we're gonna put the controls in to make sure that it happens. Fund reconciliations, and that's kind of a technical accounting issue. The city has multiple funds, and so but we have one single bank account that handles the cash for most of those funds. So, for example, if we want to use some of the 2% monetization tax money, we spend it out of the general fund, and then we reimburse the general fund. Well, that wasn't happening. So that's called a due tos and due froms. Those were not being balanced correctly. That's just an accounting gymnastics, and I don't know if the people weren't capable of understanding that, but we've gotten that to the point where we do that on a monthly basis. All of that one's corrected already. And then we've gone back and I worked with, as you heard last night from the audit partner, I worked with her to address old funds and try to decide whether they were still funds that are active or not. And if they weren't active, we got them off the books and cleaned them up. Grant administration of the blight program, we just, you know, the blight program is a good program, and it's going to be a growing program for the city, and we just need to make sure that we do it right. We made a couple of technical errors. I think that the state of Mississippi is happy with the way that it was finally resolved, but we made a couple of mistakes along the way that we're not going to make again. And control over federal expenditures, and that really is the same thing that I've already talked about, is that we get grants, and this year we're going to get big grants. We're going to get a $3 million grant for blight. We're going to get possibly a $2 million grant for watershed. We have the ARPA money yet to spend. We have CARES funds yet to spend. So what we have to have is we have to have good federal controls over that, because all of that, all of the money that we get from the federal government, regardless of the purpose or why it came to the city, is under the control and under the rules of the federal government. And so when we select vendors, we have to do it properly. When we make payments, we have to do it properly. And now this morning, I will tell you that we got an email talking about the first annual ARPA report that has to go in by April 30th. And that's kind of an update as to what are you using the ARPA money for and how have you spent it so far. So everything comes with, I would like to say there's strings, but they're more like ropes to me attached to the money. But we need to make sure that we know where we're at, and that when we're getting grants, somebody has a file that they have what's called GANs, which is a grant announcement notice. Okay, you get that. We need to have those in a single file so that we know that the grants are being administered properly, that we're using it for the right purpose, and we're following the rules. And you know what? These are complex rules, and you just can't do them off the cuff, and that we've had that problem.
And you mentioned last night that federal programs director, a dedicated federal programs director would help with that.
That's absolutely be my recommendation, is that somebody pulls this all together in one, has one portfolio that is related to this. Now, long-term, do we need it? I don't know if we'll continue to get federal grants or not. I hope we do. But right now, we'll have somewhere between $5 and $10 million worth of federal grant money that needs to be administered correctly. And I'm going to tell you that's a day-to-day. Once we get the new blight program going, and once we start watershed and whatever else we're going to do with ARPA, that's going to be a day-to-day responsibility. It's not going to be something that somebody can do part-time on the side.
Now, has that followed department to department since, I think, Christina Berry was the name of the last federal programs director for the city? Is that correct?
I think she was the city planner, but I don't think she was.
I don't know that we've had this position before. And
Well, I mean,
George Irby was the director of federal programs when he was full-time.
yeah, but George, you know, we talked about that this morning in the staff meeting, and you know, George is working with certain grants. You know, so for example, home improvement grants, the blight grant, but he really wasn't in with the FEMA grant, or he wasn't in with, he hasn't really
so
dealt.
there's been a hodgepodge of people involved, department from department to department.
Too many cooks in the chef, too many cooks in the kitchen. And quite frankly, we need one person that's coordinated. Now, it'll take a lot of other people. We want people to be involved in that process. But what we need to do is have one single person responsible to make sure that when the federal government says, what did you do with this, or how did you do that, they can give them an answer that they know today. And it's not like something we have to go hunting for.
And one more question that I have right now, $3.2 million overspent from the general fund budget in FY 2020. Ms. Holly issued a warning at the end of yesterday's report that the 2021 audit report isn't going to be perfect either in all likelihood. Can you say with certainty right now that the city has an accurate to the penny accounting for what has been spent in the general fund, in at least FY '23, right
Oh, I'll go
Does the
that.
city know how much money has been spent?
FY '22 and FY '23. We're reconciling the bank account on a monthly basis now. So, and we're following budgets. I gave the city council last night a budget comparison of actual to spending for expenditures, and then also actual to receipts for revenues. So we're keeping an eye on it. We understand it. I will tell you that one of the things we're implementing this year is a brand new budget program. And this budget program will be transparent. It'll be available so that people in the community and the mayor and the city council, everyone can see how it's being put together, how it's happening, and when it comes together, it is truly the city's budget and not just the CFO's dream budget or something. It's something that we need to work on, and that implementation is happening as we speak. And so when I say things are getting corrected, we're making the progress. Sometimes it's not as fast as people would like. I had, at least one city council member asked me last night, well, why isn't it fixed already? And I will tell you that catching us up to where we're at today has been a major task. Keeping us up is a major task. And now, quite frankly, fixing what needs to be fixed is additional on top of that. But none of this is not fixable. There's an answer for every bit of this. It just needs to get done and needs to get done correctly.
I have a question about the debt. I know the city's debt in 2020 was around, FY 2020 was around 34 million. What is it now?
You know what? I can tell you, well, no, wait a minute, I can't tell you because this is 2020 numbers. I will tell you that it is less. The good news is that it's significantly less than the 2020 number.
It's in the 20s, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in the 20s. The city is limited to how much debt it can issue based on the community and the value of the community as a percent. So we're limited to that, and we stick to those limits. But it has been my philosophy, and I know it's the mayor's philosophy also, is that I want to pay debt down as much as possible because it costs the city a lot in interest. And now these bonds that we have are not high interest, but when you're looking at 20 to 25 million, even at 2 or 3% interest rate, that's money that could be being spent in the community. So as we go forward, and we've met with, I had the pleasure of meeting with the former CFO from Tupelo, who kind of gave me some tips on how he turned Tupelo around, and I think there was some good advice in that. And I will tell you that we'll be focused on that too. But I can get you the exact number, but I just don't have it right now. But it is significantly less. We've been paying off debt in the last year, 18 months.
Any more for Jim?
Questions for Jim? Do we have any online for Jim?
No, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Jim. And let me reiterate something from earlier too. I mean, I like for Jim to be able to address a lot of these issues because once I start addressing them, it becomes political, correct? And that's what we're trying to avoid. That's what takes us off getting to where we need to be within the city. I am wanting to be respectful until the city council has had a chance to review it and to approve it before I make any more solid statements on it. But it is a public record now, and we are being transparent, and we want y'all to review it and continue to ask questions. I am going to be sensitive to what I say until we get to that point. I think Jim has articulated very well what we have been dealing with, what I will say to the community and to the council and to all, that these are not all easy fixes. And I think we have the best CFO in the state of Mississippi that is helping us through this process. we will continue to work hard and be transparent on what we're doing because we do need to be accountable to the citizens. This part of being a good steward, you know, one of the things that we've talked about in the past, and Wanda alluded to this last night, Ms. Holly, was that one of the council members, I believe, asked what her thoughts were on how we got here and how do we fix it. And it's quite simply hiring people with the qualifications to do the job. And to be able to do that, you have to be able to pay them at a higher level than we had in the past. I am hesitant to, you know, it's anytime you talk about things like this, it looks like you're pointing fingers or throwing somebody else under the bus, and that's not what this is. But facts are facts, and audits like this show facts. And so that's where my concentration is going to be going forward, as it has been already, is to not continue to throw shade on what happened in the past, but what are we doing to correct it in the future? I think that's where our best efforts, my best efforts and the council's best effort is to move forward on that, and for the citizens to pay close attention to what we're doing, for the media to report on what we're doing, and then, you know, keep moving forward in a positive manner. The city has much to be proud of. We have positioned ourselves, as Jim mentioned, for some significant federal grants and state grants. We are partnering with the county on projects when we can, because our audits will not allow us in some, like MDOT things, to do it at this point. We're going to get those things cleaned up where the city can be very aggressive in going after the money that's there that we simply can't pay for with the resources that we have within the city. One of the things that Jim and I have talked about many times that we need to continue to do is to work towards having, you know, a plan you know, for making sure that we have money set aside for long-term issues that we know the city will have, as far as a capital budget for maintaining our buildings, maintaining the vehicles and the supplies that we need. You know, one of the things that the city has faced in recent years, and I think is a direct cause of where we are, is not having the funding to be able to, you know, pay employees at a level that can make us competitive with other municipalities our size. We are trying to address all those, and we have. I think we've made some good progress, but we still have a lot of work to do. We've been waiting on this audit for quite some time. And so now that we have it, as we move forward, once the council has approved it, we can be more strategic in our conversations and where our plans are going forward. Any other questions about the audit or anything else that was discussed last night?
Were you going to address the school board appointment?
The council did vote on a 4-2 vote to appoint former Mayor Smith to the school board. The school board appointment, as I've said many, many times, is one of the most important appointments that the council can make. When you look at a city's success, many times it's gauged towards the success of the school system. I also thanked Ms. Cox for her service. She had been serving as president of the board. And, you know, when you are making appointments like this, it's important to try to make sure that we are appointing the best people that we can to move the organizations forward, and the council made their decision last night.
Are you concerned that the council chose to change horses on the school board in the middle of the superintendent's search?
Well, yes. I mean, you know, in times like this, you look for stability as you're trying to move forward. But again, you know, the council had all the facts. They knew, you know, where the school board is. They knew about Ms. Cox. She came last night and spoke about her desire to stay on board. She has also said afterwards, I read in the dispatch this morning, that just because she's not on the school board doesn't mean she won't stay involved. What I have also said many, many times, and will continue to say, is that regardless of whether you have a student in the public school system or ever will, or a grandchild or anybody, every citizen in Columbus should be concerned about the health and welfare of our public school system. And I will continue, as long as I'm mayor, to speak out and be an advocate for the school system. You know, once we appoint the board members to the board, it is our job as the mayor and the council to step out of the way and let them do their jobs. If you go and look at the state statutes for board members of the school board, it's very clear in that. And so, you know, my stance is that I will be supportive of whoever is on the board and will do everything I can to make them successful. As I stated last night, I congratulated former Mayor Smith on his election, thanked Mrs. Cox, I thanked the other applicant. It's, you know, these are not, to be able to want to step up and do something like this on a board for the city is very important. And I commend anyone who is interested in trying to make a difference.
But at the same time, we've spent a long time here talking about the financial mess that the city's in, and all of that happened on Robert's watch. I mean, the city put him on the school board last night. So, I mean, what was your response to that? Without any discussion?
You will have to ask the council members about that. You know, I was prepared to make my decision if it was called upon me to do so. It did not happen. That's a question for the council. What I would just reiterate is I'm here to support whoever is on the board and to try to make them as successful as possible.
Changing gears on the bridge, a question was texted in that now that the city's received the funds, do you have an estimate yet on when work would start or when it would complete?
We're looking at March.
To start?
Yeah.
And how long would it take?
6 months.
Latter March and 240-day
Yeah.
anticipated construction time period.
Yeah, we're gonna have more information on that coming forward, but it looks like it's gonna be the latter part of March, which is good news. We're excited, and again, I thanked Jeff and our maritime attorney for all the hard work that went into that. That was quite a Herculean task, to say the least. We're excited about the good news there and moving forward and getting the bridge completed, and hopefully being able to announce in the not too distant future that the state saw fit to help us complete the amphitheater, which will be a big asset to the city. So we're watching that in Jackson, hoping that that will come to fruition. And I would encourage all of our citizens to reach out to our legislators and ask them to please support what we're trying to do with the amphitheater. It's long past overdue to be completed, and will be, whether you're a fan of it or not, at this stage, we need to complete it and turn it into an asset for the city.
Can you speak to the annexation study that was proposed last night and kind of what went on there and how that resolved itself?
Yes, there is an interest from some of the council members to hire someone else to do annexation and to look at annexation, a study, and redistricting. We have already gone through the process of redistricting and paid over $6,000 in that process. And I think in the past, the time before when that was done, it ended up costing around $12 to get that done. The group that some of the council members have reached out to expressed that they would prefer to work with us if there was a unanimous support of the council and the mayor, and did not come last night to speak to that until we are in a position to do that. They would like to work with the city, but had felt that it was not productive unless there was consensus. And so I have, told the council that I'm more than happy to sit down and discuss. There's a lot of things that go into looking at redistricting and annexation. We have not, the city, the annexed areas that we did in 2019, we have not successfully given all the services to those areas. I think it's important that we sit down as a group and discuss these things probably at a work session to determine, what is in the best interest of the citizens as far as annexation and redistricting is. Again, I don't want this to turn into a political bout between the council and the mayor. It shouldn't be that way. This should be something that is, when you're looking at annexation and these types of things, that you're doing it in a way that is smart and productive for the city. And I am very much of the mindset that the cities need to look at annexation periodically. I think that's a smart thing to do. But you have to look at the totality of it. And the proposal that we had last night was for over $54,000 to switch gears at this point. We had not set that money aside in the budget. I think if the council is going to make a serious decision like that, a lot of serious discussions should be made in advance. So that's kind of where that is.
Can you just give any votes that were made after executive session?
Oh, the board voted unanimously to take the recommendation of the Director of Public Works to terminate an employee that had not shown up for work. Did I say?
For several days in a row.
For several days in a row, yes. Did I sum that up pretty well, council? We always want to be very careful about how we handle personnel issues.
That's all the questions I had online. You got any more? That's it.
All right, thanks, everybody.